I'm just going to do a little introduction. Okay. We've got a good number of people coming in. Paul, I will continue to let people in once
Okay.
we start. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Safe Network webinar series. Those of you who have been here before, thanks for coming back. We try to do these monthly or at least every other month. This is part of the Safe Network, New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition's Safe Network, to help both educate and support advocates and everybody who's working for safe streets. Paul is going to moderate and introduce our speaker today, Steve Vaccaro. I just want to give a quick announcement for those of you who have been following our policy efforts. We've been trying to get the Target Zero Commission bill passed. It has been passed twice by the Assembly and has been passed by the Transportation Committee in the New Jersey Senate. It is being heard Monday for second reading in the Budget and Appropriations Committee in Trenton at 1 p.m. After we are assuming it will be passed. If it is passed by that committee, it will go to the full floor for a full vote, and then we'll go to the governor's office to be signed. So we are encouraging any of you who can make 1 p.m. in Trenton to join us. It is the Budget and Appropriations Committee hearing. Just go to Trenton and tell them you're here for that committee's hearing at 1 p.m. If you want to speak, you can come and sign up to speak, or you can just come and support the other speakers. So I encourage everybody to come, and we'll of course let you know what happens after Monday. So thanks again for coming. I'm going to turn this over to Paul, who will introduce you to Steve.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank everybody who makes this possible, and I really appreciate everyone signing in today. So we have a lot of these different topics, these webinars, just about every other month. And this one has captured a lot of interest. You know, we're all working to make our roadways safer and for people biking and walking. And ultimately, this is our greatest fear of, you know, the lack of those efforts resulting in crashes. And so Steve Vaccaro of Vaccaro Law has been very active in this bike and walk world for many years, big supporter, and has specialized in this form of law. He is going to be talking to us today. And thank you very much, Steve, for coming on. Just coincidentally, Rebecca Feldman, who has been a big champion of the safe passing law, and I call her the social media queen because she just puts out some really well done posts promoting the safe passing law and other good practices. Shared a post about a very scary close pass. So we'll be talking about that later today. But Steve, I just want to open it up to you. And again, thank you very much for agreeing to come on and talk about all the various nuanced issues that we face when we do crash, and this other topic of what can we do when there isn't any actual physical contact, but darn close. So Steve.
Okay. Paul and Deborah, thanks so much for inviting me, and how exciting that you have so many folks who have been touched by your message and your organization, NJBWC, which I'm a big supporter of, as you know, who want to turn out and come to this, you know, remote presentation. You know, this is huge, and this is great, the opportunity to speak to all of you about what's going on. So thanks everyone for coming. I am getting notifications that people should be admitted to the waiting room, but you know, I want to have the screen share function available to me, but I don't want to like manage participants because it'll just
yeah, you're fine. We'll take care of that.
Okay, thanks very much. Let me give you a quick overview. I'm going to talk a little bit about my work and our law firm. I'm going to, it's going to be a split of practical advice and policy analysis, really bouncing back and forth. But there was a big emphasis when I got feedback from Paul about what we should be speaking about is driver accountability. How can we hold drivers accountable for their actions? And the way that I like to think about that is in terms of different accountability programs that we have for drivers, because it's useful. There are multiple programs. Most of them are dysfunctional in one way or another. But they include, you know, the criminal justice system. They include the administrative justice system that is supposedly being run by the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission, which also includes driver's education. And I'm going to speak a little bit about that. There is the civil justice system. If a driver invades your legal rights and harms you, if you have a claim you can pursue for compensation in the civil justice system, how does that go? And then this idea of like market justice, the idea that, well, drivers will behave themselves because if they don't, they'll get events will occur that raise their insurance rates, and so therefore they're being held accountable that way. So I'll call that like market justice, so to speak, or market accountability. There are issues and pluses and minuses with all of these, and I want to cover all of them, particularly in light of some of the videos that you sent. I have some videos also of my own. And some other materials that I'd like to show, including some materials from a case I was recently involved in and pretty much wrapped up, that comes out of Mountain Lakes, New Jersey, up in Morris County. I know that a couple members of the family of the fatal crash victim in that case appear to be on the phone, so that's really great. And I am going to, with redactions, be using a couple of the documents from that case to illustrate just what I've learned as I go through and I pursue these cases on behalf of people who are harmed in traffic. Okay, so I'm Steve Vaccaro. I'm an attorney who's admitted to the bar in New York and New Jersey. I did go to school at Rutgers Law in Newark, and I've lived at times in my life in New Jersey. My mother lived here seemingly almost forever. But I do practice primarily in New York. And one of the most important things that people need to understand is that even though it might seem to the typical person in traffic that the rules are sort of the same everywhere, probably with this group, you know they're not. There are different rules in different jurisdictions, and it really comes down to what's the law, and you need to know exactly what the laws are. Certainly if you're going to try to change them, as you've done with the 4-foot passing rule here in New Jersey, which was a tremendous step forward, something we would love to emulate here in New York. But really, bear in mind, I can't attach to every single thing I say that this holds true for New York, or this holds true for this county in New Jersey, or this township. You're just going to have to assume that there are limits to the legal principles I lay out because different jurisdictions have different laws. That said, I've been working in the space for about 20 years, trying to prevent traffic violence. I call it traffic violence because the alternative term, accidents, just really doesn't do it justice, as I'm sure most of you know. An accident is a term that's laden with all of these meanings that I don't think are appropriate in the context of a harmful, violent interaction in traffic. I think that calling something an accident brings to mind something that was completely unavoidable. It calls to mind something that potentially no one can be blamed for, like a strike of lightning out of the blue. Traffic crashes are not like that. Traffic crashes and traffic violence are the product of intentional decisions made by roadway designers, people who manage traffic safety education and traffic risk enforcement, including police and other persons in government. And most fundamentally, traffic crashes are the products of decisions that people make to divert attention away from what is probably the most dangerous thing that any of us on this call ever do, which is operating a motor vehicle in traffic. It is so dangerous, and yet people act like it's, you know, like making toast in your toaster in the morning. It's not, but the message that we get from the car manufacturers is that it's totally safe, and we really ought to relinquish operation of the motor vehicles to the car, because the robocars are coming and we won't have to make any decisions. The cars will make all the decisions and they'll make them right. You know, but it's just not like that in a dense urban environment. I'm frankly agnostic on the idea that there could be lanes on interstates set aside for robo 16-wheelers that could proceed safely in a lane that was physically separated by Jersey barriers from the rest of the traffic. And then that might be a viable and economical way of moving cargo on an intercity basis. But once you get into a residential neighborhood, once you get into a place where there are vulnerable road users on their bikes, or, you know, walking, on increasingly on scooters or other types of conveyances, you know, you're going to, you know, you have to have human beings responsible ultimately for those choices. So that's my perception, and that's why I've created this law firm that is kind of devoted to vulnerable road users. The bulk of our clients are cyclists, and I'm a big, regular, pretty much everyday cyclist myself. But we also have represented a lot of pedestrians in cases where pedestrians have been harmed. And you know, in addition to representing people as a personal injury lawyer, which means that I pursue civil claims and seek compensation on behalf of my clients who've been harmed, we do a lot of advocacy work. And I'm very interested in this area. And just so you know, what I do, just to have a frame of reference, I'm on the board of Bike New York, which runs events such as the Twin Light Rides in New Jersey, and is a force here in New York City with the 5-Borough Bike Tour, Transportation Alternatives, which has been around for over 50 years and has really reshaped our roads here in New York City, and I think lays out a lot of the roadmap for what people might want to try to do in New Jersey, even though the terrain, political and otherwise, is quite different. And so you have to take those lessons and adapt them. I founded a political action committee called Streets PAC back in 2014, so that vulnerable road users and people interested in proper management and fair and just management of the public realm, streets, plazas, parks, you know, so that we could have a voice and focus our influence on the elected officials who make the decisions determining what that public space is going to look like, and how safe or unsafe it is. We channel financial contributions and volunteer support to elected officials who are trying to improve our public space, make it safer, and improve biking and walking in basically not just in New York City, but also throughout New York State. I'm also on the board of New York Cycle Club, and I lead groups of 5 to 10 cyclists pretty much every weekend, year round. I have a big ride coming up in 2 days, but that one's in Westchester, but often I'm out in New Jersey. I love to go out to places like Jenny Jump Mountain and Duke Farms, and you know, where the Twin Light Rides goes, you know, where you can pick up the ferry from Highland. I mean, so many places up and down New Jersey, not just the sort of 9W corridor up to Rockland. So that's me. And our law firm is a community-based law firm to try to represent the interests of this community that I think is underrepresented by the legal profession, and by a lot of other sort of movements, you know, that are seeking justice. You know, there are different very important struggles for justice, but I think the struggle for justice for victims of traffic violence is really slow to get going, and has its own peculiar historical arc that I'll be talking about a little bit, or bits and pieces here and there throughout the talk. Before I jump into some other things, I just want to give some very quick practical advice about what to do when you're in a crash. You know, it's important to remember that people who have been in a crash have suffered a trauma, And frankly, they're not in their right state of mind. And I know this personally, not only having it told to me by clients, but I know it personally from having been in crashes. There is a fight or flight response typically to that trauma. And I describe it, since I'm a science fiction fan, as having some kind of alien mind control, taking charge of you. Now, I do this for a living, so you figure I know better, or at least as well as anyone, what to do in a crash. I felt an almost uncontrollable urge in one particular crash I had in 2016, where a driver tried to turn left into me, no, it was 2012. It was during Hurricane Sandy, actually, where I just wanted to lock up my bike and get on the subway and get to a place where there were people who cared about me. You know, I just wanted to get out of there. And I also know there are other cases where people are so angry that they lose it. You know, they may have a broken femur, the big bone in the upper leg, but they get up and they want to start a fight with the driver who hit them and gave them that broken bone. Neither response, of course, is appropriate. You do not want to flee the scene of your own crash because you will lose valuable rights if you do. So you have to resist that overwhelming compulsion to leave the scene. And you certainly want to resist the compulsion to fight with the person who hit you. You want police at the scene. And many of us have had a variety of experiences with police. Some of us may have had less than optimal experiences with police. But the fact is, police have not only a law enforcement function, but also a public safety function, which is very different. And when you are the victim of a crash, you need the police there to help you unless you really are sure that you're fine. People will not be aware how badly injured they are in the 5, 10, 20, or 30 minutes following a crash, maybe even much longer with certain types of injuries to the spine that can be quite serious. So, you know, in New York, I like to tell people, always go and get checked out medically unless you're sure you're fine, because in New York, the driver has to pay your medical expenses, including your ambulance bill, if there was any contact, regardless of fault. It's part of our no-fault system. In New Jersey, there's a no-fault system, but it's very different. It is your own auto insurance that's supposed to pay your ambulance bill, your medical bills, when a driver strikes you. Most people don't realize that. And what if you don't have auto insurance? What do you rely on? Well, in New Jersey, there is a fund called, the acronym is PLIGA, Property Liability Insurance Guarantee Association. And that fund, which gets money out of premiums paid by other people who do have insurance policies in New Jersey, is there to pay your ambulance or your medical bills. But I've got to tell you, I have never once had a client who needed to call on PLIGA to pay their ambulance bill and their medical bills after a crash, who did not have a private investigator sent to snoop around their home, their job, or some other part of their personal business, because as far as I can tell, this PLIGA assumes that anyone who makes a claim on them is presumptively a fraudster. And frankly, it's outrageous and it's upsetting and it's very disturbing to me, but I've had it, and you know, it just seems to be their standard operating practice. They're very difficult to deal with. They do ultimately pay those bills, so it's there as a safety net. But what I tell everyone in these sorts of talks that I speak to is that your best bet is to have an auto policy, and you don't need to own a car. There is a type of policy called a non-owner's auto policy that will provide you with the no-fault personal injury protection insurance that will pay for the hospital, for the ambulance, for any follow-up medical treatment, potentially lost earnings that you sustain. And so if you are a car owner and have a motor vehicle policy, look on that policy and see how much coverage you have for what is called PIP. PIP. You want the PIP coverage because that's going to cover medical expenses, lost earnings, and potentially certain other expenses of a crash. Secondly, look and see how much coverage there is in your policy for what's called UMSUM. That stands for uninsured motorist, supplemental underinsured motorist coverage. UMSUM coverage is there in case the driver who hits you has no coverage. You can buy your own coverage to protect yourself against the negligent driver who harms you and doesn't have coverage of their own, or doesn't have enough coverage to satisfy or compensate you appropriately for the harm they caused, right? And when you think about it, the people most likely to hit you probably have hit other people in the past, okay? If they've hit other people in the past, their insurance costs more money, their car insurance. So they probably have the minimum car insurance. And in New Jersey, you're allowed to have no car insurance if you're eligible for federal Medicare, okay? There is a $1 a day policy where you pay $365 a year. And this happened to a client of mine who was cycling and got doored outside of a high school where a teenager popped the door open. Parents were dropping him off for school and popped the door right open into him and seriously injured this guy. And the owner of the car is someone who was eligible for federal Medicaid and qualified for what's called a $1 a day policy, which means they have zero coverage for the person they hurt with their car. Luckily, my client did own a car, did have an auto policy, and was able to draw on that policy for compensation to pay medical bills and to deal with the disruptions in his life. But that is, you know, he was lucky in that situation. I don't own a car. I have a non-owner's policy. I pay less than half of what other comparable people in my neighborhood would pay if they owned a car. And that non-owner's auto policy protects me when I'm in a car. I might rent one. When I'm on a bike. It protects me when I'm on foot, and it protects all of my family members who live with me against the harm that might be caused by some other person in a car. I mean, look, it's still significant money to get one of these policies, so it's a shame if you can't afford it. But if you can, you seriously should consider getting a policy like this. The other thing, so you're prepared for a crash if you have that insurance in place. You're certainly prepared for a crash if you go around with video equipment, videoing what you see out there. I don't do it, not because I'm against it. Many of my clients have benefited from the video we've been able to collect, some of it collected by their own personal helmet or handlebar mounted cameras of a crash and who was at fault. For me, it's just like one more step. You know, I have to strip my lights off the bike. Police aren't there protecting people from stealing bikes. I have to lock up my bike. I mean, there's so much stuff that I have to do about my bike. Like one more thing, like, oh, I have to download my video, or I have to turn on my camera. I have to charge my camera. It's just too much for me. If it's not too much for you, go ahead and do it. And it's certainly evidence that you can use in a subsequent proceeding.
Excuse me, Steve. Steve, 1 second. I just want to circle back to clarify a point you mentioned about the non-owner's insurance. And in New Jersey, if someone, because we have a growing number of people that do not own cars, and we have
Hudson, yeah.
And we have a growing number of people that are operating motor vehicles without their own insurance. So essentially, you're in a lot of trouble if you're hit by someone who doesn't have insurance, correct?
I mean,
the no fault's not going to cover it.
I mean, you go hat in hand to Pliga. They send a private investigator to make sure you're not a fraudster. You're trying to maybe get surgery, right? When you have a badly fractured bone that requires metal hardware to realign and reset, I've had a couple of those. The doctors don't want to do that surgery more than 10 days after the bone was fractured because the bone starts to reform. The bones reknit very quickly. And an orthopedic surgeon will tell you that we like to do these surgeries within 10 days and frankly, as soon as possible in order to have to avoid re-breaking the bones, which just sounds horrible. I hate to say it, but that's literally what they might end up doing if you're sitting there waiting for PLEGA to figure out whether, you know, you're tricking them. You're trying to trick them, even if you have a police report from the scene. So wait at the scene for the police, get your police report, because a lot of private insurers will say, you know, police report or it didn't happen. You know, when you are, you know, this is the attitude, PIP coverage and SUM coverage. This is the attitude of people who you may need to make a claim upon after a crash, is that, well, you're a fraudster because, you know, I think it's the insurance companies who I used to represent, and I did for about 15 years when I was a corporate lawyer. I think it's the insurance companies that have very subtly put these messages out with the help of Hollywood to just say, like, anyone who's going to seek compensation of some kind after they've been hurt in traffic is obviously just got litigation disease. You know, ooh, I have whiplash, you know, they're making it up. But we know that these things aren't made up, and that the vast amount of the orthopedic injury burden that we see in every corner of this United States, and certainly in New York and New Jersey, is due to motor vehicle trauma, right? It's just a huge source of injuries. So, like, people have serious injuries, they have bad fractures, they need surgery, they need rehabilitation after these crashes. But there is an attitude that you're presumptively fraudulent. So you can't leave anything to chance. Now, you may be out, you may be unconscious, you can't help yourself. This is why I say, always ride on roads where you think there may be other cyclists, if you can help it. And of course, when you're out in the suburbs or the exurbs or the country, you know, there aren't lots of bike lanes or bike routes necessarily, but if you have a choice in a more urbanized area, or a place like 9W, which is a marked bicycle route, official bicycle route, ride there, because there are more likely other cyclists there who will help you. So this is a matter of safety in numbers. Very, very strong principle. Not only do those other cyclists on that roadway mean that cyclists in general are more visible to motorists, that motorists will expect to see cyclists on that road, but they will also be there to render mutual aid and help you. And if you are the cyclist who sees a crash, please, unless you absolutely can't stay, try to stop and try to help that injured cyclist, because remember, they're going through that chemical cascade, adrenaline, endorphins, fight or flight. They need your help. They need your help to document the scene. Take pictures, not just close-up picture of the license plate, which people do, understandably. They're like, oh, we got to get the license plate. And that is really, really important sometimes if it looks like a driver's trying to get away after hurting someone, not wait for the police. But, you know, try to also take a picture of the scene, the big scene, showing where did the car come to rest, where did the cyclist come to rest or pedestrian come to rest, where are they with reference to the crosswalks, with reference to the signage, with reference to traffic signals. You need big pictures that show the entire story, potentially, can be very powerful, as well as the close-up of, like, okay, this is the driver's face in case there's a story. I've had cases like that where people try to pull the old switcheroo, like someone who didn't have a license was driving, but their passenger did. So they try to put the passenger in the driver's seat and tell the cops, oh, this is who was driving. You know, you may see something like that, and you'd want to document it. And then just, unless you're sure you're fine, you really should take the ambulance trip to the hospital, because either your own auto policy is going to pay or PLEGA is going to pay. And it's not that easy to diagnose yourself and the severity of your injuries in the immediate aftermath of a crash. It's just not. And people have aggravated their injury by trying to walk or bike away from a crash that I know of. There have been problems along those lines, and you may feel like you just want to get out of there. You will feel that way. tell the person to wait for the police and make sure it's appropriately documented. So that's my practical advice of what to do when you're in a crash.
And excuse me, Steve, again, going back, because this is an interesting point, the non-owner's insurance. You have that in New York. Are you familiar with that product in New Jersey? Do you know people that have that in New Jersey?
I'm not sure. I've talked about it to groups of people in New Jersey and seen like nodding heads, but I'm not sure. But it's a pretty widely available product. Insurers like to sell as much insurance as they can. As long as there aren't any claims, they're happy to sell the policies. Most of them don't know that the traffic risks for a vulnerable road user are different, and that in underwriting those policies, they should be looking at, the reason they're so dramatically lower in premium than a car owner is based on this assumption that it's probably true on a national basis. But certainly in an urbanized area, as densely populated as most of New Jersey and in New York City downstate, you're actually exposed to a lot of traffic risks and traffic violence. And so they should be pricing those policies, frankly, I think higher than they do. So it's a pretty good deal.
Thank you. And I see Emmanuel has added some information on that for policies in New Jersey. And it has been an issue, a similar issue about how e-bikes are covered for people that don't have e-bike coverage, because the insurance industry tells us there are no policies available yet for e-bike riders.
Right. And that's a rapidly developing field that I can't say that I know or understand completely enough to sort of hold forth on it. I did want to jump so that we can have some period of time for questions and answers at the end. I am due back in court at 2:15, but that ending at 2 works for me. About this idea of accountability systems for drivers, okay? So criminal justice system, back at the dawn of the motoring age, drivers who hit people and hurt them or killed them were considered criminals in the 19-teens, in the 1920s. What are you doing with this machine in the road? And you killed my father, you killed my child. Police, come. And the police would arrest that driver and take them away. And what has happened is that we have become so accustomed to cars taking over our public space and creating traffic danger and traffic violence when it becomes manifest, that we have decriminalized traffic misconduct. And so most of it is under the rubric of what is called a violation. And one of the most fundamental things in the law that you need to understand is that a violation for which you might get a traffic summons, or you might get a sanitation summons if you don't put your garbage out properly, or you might get a summons from, any one of a number of different government agencies, like if you don't manage your pet right, that is not criminal. There are certain trappings of the criminal law that go along with being accused of a violation and getting a summons. There are certain ways that it is handled that are similar to the criminal law, but really it's a different animal. And in this country, we decriminalized traffic violence in the 1950s and 60s. Now, of course, it was always true that if you took a car and could be proven to have killed someone or harmed them intentionally with the car, that was always recognized as something that went in a different bucket. Of course, that was criminal. So one of the things police want to know after a crash is, well, did they know each other? Or are these two strangers who encountered each other in traffic? Or was it like, boyfriend and girlfriend? And they were trying to settle things without words. But seriously, criminal justice system has certain pigeonholes of what will be considered criminal when it comes to driving misconduct that causes harm. Certainly fleeing from law enforcement, if a driver is fleeing from the scene of a crime in a police chase scenario, anything they do to harm people, the police will throw the book at them, typically. They will, the district attorneys will take the highest charge that could apply. They'll assume, and sometimes by operation of law, automatically any harm done while fleeing from police is automatically considered intentional harm. But other forms of misconduct while driving, such as hitting someone while you don't have a valid license, hitting someone when you don't have any insurance, hitting someone and fleeing the scene, certainly in a non-fatal crash. These are considered, they're not really considered as crime-fighting priorities, even though the victim is a victim who deserves consideration, and the problem is a societal problem we see every day. Law enforcement resources are scarce, we're told. Obviously, that isn't immutable, and sometimes we're told that, and it's really just because people don't want to deal with the criminal dimension of drivers who cause harm. But the fact is, the criminal justice system is usually the last place that crash victims get satisfaction of any kind. And the other thing is that a criminal prosecution of a driver does not get controlled by the victim. I mean, you might have an opportunity to go in and give a victim impact statement in the context of sentencing, but mainly it's up to the prosecutor. They decide which crime to charge. They decide, whether to make a plea deal with the driver to let them plead to lesser charges. And you as the victim can't really control or influence that, except insofar as you participate in the political process and try to put pressure on your county prosecutor to handle these sorts of crimes differently. Now, I do want to mention one exception to what I was talking about, which is driving while intoxicated or impaired by drugs or alcohol, right? There was a time when drunk driving was treated like a folk crime, like, it's criminal, but, it's not really criminal. It's like, littering or something like that. That changed. In the 70s and the 80s, that changed. And it was changed as by a result of the political organization and action of the drunk driving crash victims. There were many, many organizations. Probably the best well-known one is Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD. But that is an example of how we have gone back and recriminalized certain kinds of dangerous driving conduct. And we can continue to do that. We can do it with respect to sober, stay at the scene, licensed drivers. We don't need to just accept the laws the way they're enforced or written now. Victims of drunk driving changed the laws to say that it is automatically a criminal offense, and a serious one of a high grade, whether it's a high misdemeanor or a low felony, and have put teeth in those laws. And police and prosecutors get the message. Look, police and prosecutors want to enforce the law. That's their job. But they're not so clear on what their job is in a traffic situation, because they also have this public safety role. I mean, yes, they show up. They want to make sure people don't get more hurt. They want to make sure that people don't, get the care that they need. But do they view it as a crime to be investigated and prosecuted? Most of them have the same car blindness that many people have, where they just say, this was an accident. Who cares what fault it was? Could it be a crime? I mean, there's a statute about careless driving in New Jersey and a statute about reckless driving in New Jersey. People can get these charges, but they don't necessarily result in any kind of meaningful criminal sanction, and they may just be dismissed. So you find that the police and prosecutors don't necessarily go after these sorts of crashes, even when they're fatal. And I did just want to use the share screen function to talk a little bit about the criminal justice system, because
Little green button down the bottom center.
No, I've got that. I'm looking for the thing that I want to share.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
And while you're looking for that, I was hoping you might be able to just lay out a few steps that we should, as victims, cyclists, pedestrians, what we should expect the police to go through, like to the steps on a scene when police do show up, or even before that, call the police, call 911. What steps, getting insurance from, getting pictures, if there's a few steps to be clear on that.
Mhm.
And we
You
see
know,
your picture.
yeah, you see a picture. So just in answer to what you said, there's tremendous variability in law enforcement practices and degree of support and sympathy that you find across New Jersey. So one of the things that made it possible for us to do so much in New York City is we have the single giant jurisdiction of millions of people with a single legal system. So we can have our city council change the laws, and we have some degree, we think, of influence over how the police department is run, et cetera, and so forth. In New Jersey, it is very, very different. In New Jersey, there is a tradition in the government of empowerment of towns and even villages. The town of Ridgewood, New Jersey has a rule that says you're not allowed to ride a bicycle in Ridgewood unless you have registered and have a bicycle license from the town of Ridgewood. Very few people know that. There are some other towns that have a similar rule. So, the thing, so it's really jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but I would say that police forces outside of New York City have less crimes, like less bad, violent crimes like murder and other kinds of intentional crimes that may be competing for resources with crime committed in traffic. And I have found them to be more responsive and helpful in these sorts of cases than many, many, many times we find of NYPD in New York City. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities that I see for victims of traffic violence and safe street advocates in New Jersey is the ability to partner with your local police, because the fact is, they're more likely to care about this stuff, I think, than the average NYPD officer in a giant jurisdiction like New York City. That's just my opinion, but it is formed by working with a lot of different police in a lot of different contexts. I wanted to show you this image, which is taken from a pleading in the case that I mentioned, in which a driver struck and killed a woman who was crossing in this crosswalk. And I did this to illustrate that the driver had obviously violated the law in a manner that should be dealt with seriously by the criminal justice system. Because look, just from the positioning of this vehicle, you can see that this driver crossed over the double yellow, not in the gap in the double median where they're supposed to, but over the double yellow. And you can see it again. Here's the front of the vehicle. It's right there. It's in the oncoming traffic of the other road. What's this guy doing here? How did he end up there unless he cut the corner and hit this pedestrian, essentially from behind, from her 5 o'clock, I would say. And this was a teenage driver, okay? And I got the police officer from the small town who investigated here to admit that the driver, yeah, probably cut the corner. I even got the expert for the defendant driver to admit, yeah, looks like he cut the corner. How could he have gone through here with his car at that angle? But nothing was done. There was absolutely no response from the criminal justice system. And then another thing that I got that was just amazing was this teenage provisional driver's records. And I just wanted to show you what some of these records say. And for some reason, it's not showing as clearly as I would like. It's not even legible. What are the 5 things we should yield to? This is a New Jersey high school driver's ed course. Well, you can't really read it that well, but you're just going to have to believe me when I say pedestrians didn't make the list. The next question, what could the fines go up to for not yielding to pedestrians in the crosswalk? Who he knew that one, it could cost him $500. He knew I should yield to a bus. He thought he should yield to, you know, some other things that might hurt his car if he didn't yield to them. You know, postal vehicles, I can make that one out. But no, he wasn't taught properly. You know, that it starts with the educational system. And then when it comes to the department, the Motor Vehicle Commission, which is the one in charge, well, first they sent this driver a scary notice saying scheduled suspension. You have a provisional license. You're scheduled to have failure to yield to a pedestrian administratively. This is the administrative justice system. We're going to suspend your driving privilege for 16 months unless you respond to this notice. He responded. The driver responded. Went to a pre-hearing conference, and then what happened? We decided we're not going to suspend your license. That's too harsh. Yeah, you killed someone. But as a result of the conference, in lieu of suspension of your driving privilege, you have to go back and pass your written exam a second time within 60 days. And if you can't pass the written exam, then you might have a consequence. But here the consequence was showing up at Motor Vehicle Commission and taking a driver's test that surely, you know, that student was graded 100% on their driver's ed when they failed to mention pedestrians as something they should yield to. I haven't looked at the test lately that they actually apply, but I can't imagine it's much different. So that's one thing. Now, I also saw some videos about close passes. I had a problem because honestly, like some nowadays, I don't really, I don't use Facebook, but I looked at the videos, okay? I looked at the videos, I saw what happened, and we have a 4-foot passing rule. But I want to show you a different video. Well,
Steve,
sure, let's show this one. Go.
Yeah, we're kind of running down on time. I really wanted to get to this very recent case because it really speaks to the point of what can we do when we're not hit, yet we have very good documentation and we're not getting real fast action by the police. So you're not going to hear any of this, but you'll see the car come by and pass, and you'll see a couple other cars pass as well. So clearly there was no obstruction. There was nobody coming in the opposite direction. That wouldn't really matter anyway. So obviously a very close pass, and wanted to get your thoughts on, and let me add, you know, I've also heard that using video in court is very, very common these days. So what are your thoughts about this video, how it can be used, and what we can do even in cases where we're not hit, but very, very close. And what I'm not showing is that car went, turned around and came back the other way and passed another cyclist on the other side of the road going the opposite direction, close as well.
Sure. And I would say this. I would say, number one, I think that the 4-foot passing rule is a great thing. And I believe I have seen the difference in all the riding that I do, hundreds of miles a year, if not thousands in New Jersey, that most drivers get it. But I mean, that's the thing about changing behavior. You know, it's a process. So some people get it. Some people are angry and they want to deliberately violate the law. It may be that that's what that driver who did the close pass that's what was going through their mind. And just footnote on that, I'll say that in my experience representing cyclists harmed in traffic, move most likely to precipitate an intentional strike from a driver is flipping the bird. Okay, which I can totally understand, and I've done it myself, right? Like that cyclist did, but just be aware, if there's a driver behind you and you do that to them, they could respond in that way by hitting you, and they still won't suffer any consequences because they'll tell whatever law enforcement personnel you might get to look at the incident and possibly investigate it. Oh, I didn't see him. They'll just say, I didn't see him. And in a context of where the driver says they weren't aware of a cyclist, the criminal justice system, in most cases, is going to ignore it. because the criminal justice system is focused on intentional wrongdoing. They want to go after the people who are trying to cause harm. Maybe you can also get some criminal justice, interest in a close pass or other kind of threatened traffic violence situation if you can show enough facts to demonstrate that the driver reasonably should have known they were passing a cyclist. And this is a great example. Here's the video. It's bright daylight. It's a bright orange jacket. It's not a big fat wide road. There aren't a bunch of things going on, that could distract the driver reasonably. The weather's clear. So why didn't this driver see this cyclist? Why didn't this driver give this cyclist 4 feet? This is a traffic violation. I will tell you that as a matter of departmental policy, NYPD officers will not issue a traffic violation unless the officer personally observed the conduct in question, which is why cops in New York City, when they're on ticket writing details to write traffic tickets, they will hide in the bushes and wait and watch. And then they'll jump out and they're like, I saw it, I'm going to write you a ticket. And that's how they're able to write 20 tickets in 8 hours. And that's what they do. And they try to go to places where doing something illegal is 100% safe, because that way they know that they're going to be able to write 20 tickets to the first 20 people who come through. And then they knock off. They do that in 2 hours. They're off for the rest of their shift. Telling police officers they should be focusing on the most dangerous conduct, like what was shown here. And it wasn't just dangerous. There is absolutely a psychic harm and injury that was inflicted on this cyclist based on what, you see in this video. But it is not actionable. The laws as written suggest that you could prosecute a crime for what this driver did because they've taken a deadly instrument and passed too close. But I'm telling you, from the viewpoint of all of the people in law enforcement, police, prosecutors, and others in New Jersey and in New York who I've dealt with, they would say this is not a criminal justice system priority. And if you insisted on it, they'd go and maybe they'd talk to the driver. I had one case with harassment in Jersey City. They went and talked to the driver, and somehow out of that discussion between the police and the driver came a claim that, oh, it was the cyclist who was harassing me. It was the cyclist who was menacing me. How that happens, I don't know, but it happens. And then all of a sudden the cyclist, oh, fair's fair. We weren't there. We didn't see what happened. If you have all that on video, you can rule that out. But I've got to tell you that going after individual motorists in incidents like this, that thankfully didn't cause physical harm, is not really our most efficient strategy for being able to, for getting drivers to respect our rights on the road. There are other things that we can use. And I'm not saying it's not a mistake to make this video. The video is helpful. It helps bring to light what we face out on the road. And it can be used to educate police and others about what kinds of activity we want to see from them in terms of law enforcement. So I'm all in favor, but mostly the criminal justice system is concerned about, I have to say it, property crime. Like if someone stole from you, that's like a big deal. I mean, personally, so anyway, yes, Paul, you want to open it up? Ask some questions?
I've been looking at a few of the questions that we have in the chat, and also some of my own questions that have been coming up. The video, well, my understanding in talking to some law enforcement is that most of the time when this happens, there was not a police officer there watching what happened. We can file a complaint. That is our right to file a complaint. We can't say anything will be done with it, but we can file a complaint. That complaint is bolstered quite a bit by having a video like this. So that's my understanding as well. What I'm not clear on is what can be done in follow-up if we are not getting follow-up with this case. So in the case of Pontus, who was riding, who was on the call, by the way, and he said the person was honking and yelling from the car, before they passed. And we'd like to see a positive response from the police department and have them, make a citation here at the very least. Any recommendations on how we follow up with the police department?
I mean, I think that the thing you need to bear in mind is that police have a dual function. It's law enforcement on the one hand, and it's public safety on the other. That police, like many people in society, the majority of us have what I would have to call car blindness, which is that they presume that things done with a car are okay when if someone did the same thing with a gun or with a different kind of machine or tool capable of producing harm, they'd look at it as a crime. You need to bear that in mind because police are drawn from society, just like all of us. They also have, they do most of their work in cars, which may tend to bolster the degree to which they're car blind. They may see tremendous amounts of traffic crime and feel overwhelmed by it and feel like, well, we just can't enforce it against everyone, so we won't enforce it against anyone, because if I just start picking and choosing who I'm going to enforce it to, then it could be arbitrary. It could be that the tiny handful of people who they enforce it against might be people who are black or brown, and then they'd have another issue on their hands. So I think there are officers who just are like, I'm not going to enforce a 4-foot passing rule because almost no one's following it. And I spend all my day doing that when I became a cop in order to catch bad guys and enforce the law. And this is just some new traffic law that the cyclists came up with, 4-foot passing. It's not right. But I think if you're going to be following up with police and trying to get them to somehow take action after something like this happens, and of course you want to document it and show them that it happened, you have to kind of get inside the mindset of the other person. You have to listen to them as you present it to them. You need to treat them respectfully and not tell them what their job is, but just present them with the facts. This is the law. The law has changed. Of course, not everyone got the memo that there's a 4-foot passing law. Although, officer, wouldn't you agree with me that you've seen a lot more motorists moving over partially or even fully into the opposing lane when they pass cyclists? So some people are getting the message, here's a guy who didn't. What can we do about this? And see what they have to say. And to do it as part of, not just as an individual, but part of as a group, and to do it in a way that's open to hearing what their ideas are for how to move the ball forward in terms of getting the word out and changing behavior. I mean, that would be my only advice. And remember, again, it's town by town in New Jersey. So they could deal with it very differently in one town as compared to in another town, and you just have to take it as it comes. There are towns in New Jersey where the police officers, even the chief of police, are big cyclists. And they're very helpful. So don't assume that the police will be hostile to you coming to them and talking about these issues. You just have to see who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry that I don't have more time to deal with this. I just, the life of a trial lawyer is sometimes you just have to go in there and do what you have to do because the judge says so. I'm just absolutely ecstatic and delighted how many people joined this call. I always love the opportunity to speak to this many people about these really important issues and to thank you for what you've done in terms of making New Jersey safer. You are moving the needle. I hope I pointed out enough of the bright spots as well as the dark clouds that face you in this challenge. And I can't urge you enough to work with Deborah, Paul, and others in your many wonderful organizations that I'm learning more and more about in New Jersey, and I love to support.
Well, Steve, yeah, and thank you so much for taking the time. And I have to say this, I still feel this way. This is going to be a story of enforcement or a story of lack of enforcement in some way. And I do want to move forward and find a positive way to interact with the department. And not make it a big, us against them. But this seems like a pretty egregious situation. Again, the rider, so this was the second pass by the driver, shouting and honking and turn around and pass the other rider. So there seems like quite a bit of intent and not just oh gosh, I didn't realize I was so close. But thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day.
Thank you, Steve. Really, really appreciate you coming. There are a lot of questions in the chat It's been a very active chat.
You know what? If you can save the chat and email it to me, I don't know when I would, but I'll try to get to it. And if I can see ways to get answers to them, I will try to do that. I promise, when I have a
Thank you,
chance.
Steve. I
That's what I
will
was gonna ask you,
curate
so
that
thank
list
you.
of questions.
Appreciate that.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So I'm going to just leave the call open here, and without our presenter, if anyone would like to raise their hand and just tell us what you're thinking. Ask a
Before we
question.
go into that, yeah.
Oh,
I think
sure.
that we can certainly keep this open. Just before we get into that conversation, I just want to let people know we have now determined a date for our summit. Those of you who know we've done a summit in the past, we're going to be doing the 2025 summit on March 29th. There will be information soon up on our website and on our email list. So first of all, if you have not signed up for our email list, please do that. It's very easy. Just go to the website, njbwc.org, to sign up, and you'll get information about these webinars and about the summit and the issues and the bill and all the latest news. But also, I think we will try to have a follow-up, at least conversation or something at the summit on some of these issues. And I'm really happy that Steve was willing to look at some of the questions and get back to us. So we'll share those answers with you as soon as we hear from them. So personally, thank everybody for participating. It's sometimes difficult to hear these conversations when we don't always have an answer. I know people have worked very hard to get the 4-foot passing law, and there's a lot of questions about enforcement and what the result will be. But anecdotally, at least, we've heard from a number of people that it has changed some driver behavior, certainly not all. And was one of the main things we saw, which would be a good result from this law, rather than expecting a lot of enforcement, which in fact we did not. So I just want to thank everybody for helping educate everybody on the safe passing law. And again, there's lots more information on our website about that. And we have bumper stickers and signs and other resources for anybody who wants to do some follow-up on the safe passing law. Okay,
And just
back to Paul.
one more plug, Deborah, for this Monday in Trenton at 1 p.m. We need this
Yes.
commission.
Yeah, and thank you, Emmanuel put in the a link where the actual it's up further up in the chat where the hearing is going to be in Trenton at 1 p.m. So, and it's also you can get that online as well. So I'm just going back quick to see.
She just bumped it up again.
Oh, great. Yeah. So it's Trenton at 1 p.m. Committee room 4 on the first floor of the State House Annex. Anybody who would like to come and testify, we welcome you.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Emmanuel. And Rebecca, I see you there. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, but thank you for all your social media posts and kind of getting this video out there. Pontus, thank you, and Jason for being willing to share it. I have to say, I'm not terribly encouraged by what the law is providing us here, and I feel like it's yet another campaign. We need to bring this to the light of day. That this is not being, taken seriously, and we, if we had, well, we have a lot of roadway deaths in New Jersey, so we need to take this seriously, and having use of video. Again, law enforcement has shared with me, they feel it's very compelling and it's used quite a bit in court. So I'll be curious to see how this moves forward. We'll be reaching out to the police department to see how they react to all this. And hopefully we can work together, as Steve was suggesting, to have a positive outcome. And at the very least, a citation here, because the safe passing law is a law and it should be enforced. So I'm gonna curate those questions and share them with Steve, and perhaps we can get them up on our website in a Q&A type thing, frequently asked questions as well. Any remaining questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and just shout them out. Or if we get a lot of people, raise your hand, but just
I just have a
let it
quick
go.
question. I just have a quick
Yes, sir.
question. I cannot figure out when the NBWC dues are due.
Good question. So we have a membership structure that doesn't have an annual renewal process. So that's something we have to work on.
Okay,
so we
thank you.
are trying to bring this around to kind of cycle with our annual summit.
The answer
But,
is now. Pay them now.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you,
That's
Nathaniel, for bringing that up.
problem. That's the problem. I'm always paying them now, and I cannot keep track of how often I am doing it. Thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah, so you sign up for a yearly membership. You can donate at any time. If you sign up for a membership from starting at the summer, you will get a discount for summit tickets. We will be instituting a reminder cycle, and sorry we haven't done that. So Nathaniel, if you haven't signed up in the past year, please go ahead. And it's easy to do on the website.
I have been doing it regularly. So what I need as a human being is just a reminder. Thank you very much. That's what I was trying to pin you down. Is there an annual date that it's expected to be paid? You know, I belong to other cycling organizations, and they send out, this is, you know, our yearly, it's time for you to renew. Yeah,
We
okay.
intend to start doing that this year. So thank you for reminding us to do that. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you all for attending. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to give me an email, send me an email. And as I mentioned, we do have car magnets, the Safe Passing Law car magnets, and we are working on getting some more yard signs. And those will be distributed at various bike shops around the state as kind of hub distribution points. So if you have any questions, please email me. I will put my email in the chat.
Can you
And
make a jersey with a safe passing sign on it, please? That would be cool.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Could you make a bike jersey with a safe passing law sign on it? That would be cool. I'd buy one. I'd pay money for it. Lots of money.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I saw that discussion on that. And there has been one.
Okay.
three, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, a variety of design ideas on
Yeah,
that.
we were talking about that possibly for some swag for the summit too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right
This is-
now, all I have are the
this
little
is,
stickers.
I'm Pontus, by the way. I'm the orange jacket guy.
Thank you for the
Pontus,
videos.
You
Pontus.
got the best name, Pontus Riding. I love it.
Yeah, but I'm a bicyclist, and my daughter is a horseback rider, so we have the perfect last name.
Paul,
That's
Steve
great.
has his hand up.
Stephen. Yes, Stephen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Hey,
Stephen.
you called on me?
Yes.
Where are you? Okay. Hey, so I just know that was a little. I think everyone probably feels a little bit sad that we're not seeing more action on some of this stuff. So I just wanted to share a little bit of my story for people that may be helpful. If you don't know, I'm a firefighter. I actually got hit right outside my firehouse here, and strangely enough, the police officers actually wrote a ticket to the guy who hit me. I'm well aware that that probably wouldn't have happened if I wasn't a firefighter in this city on my way to work for my shifts. So that bothers me, right? But also for everyone on this call, like if you do have some position where you're able to influence, police work in a positive way, I think it benefits everyone. And that's how I think we move the ball forward, just by, humanizing ourselves. We're not just crazy people on bikes, we're people going to work, we're people living our lives. So it's frustrating to see that video and not see immediate action, right? But it's not in vain. So everyone on the call, keep it up. I think we're getting there.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, humanizing, right? I mean, there wasn't this incident, I brought another incident up in a neighborhood group and on Facebook. And the response I got was, well, get the F off the road, right? So we are seen as, no, I'm serious, we are like on the lowest rung of society when it comes to traffic, and we're basically seen as disposable, right? And I think it's not the police is not the problem. The problem is that society's attitude towards cyclists, and to some extent we have ourselves to blame because see people riding 3 people abreast in through the swamp, which is really bad, right? So I mean, I think it goes much deeper than law enforcement. I think we just need to change the entire attitude towards cyclists, and not being seen as disposable.
Well, you bring up a good point, and we have to do it in a way that doesn't inflame things, right? Because it's very easy to get upset. I know I have to check myself on that. And I think Rebecca's posts are a good example. She's always great about having a very positive outlook, a positive message. How your post was about Thanksgiving, right? You're thankful for the good drivers.
Thankful for the good drivers, right?
Yeah.
And as difficult as it might be, sometimes we're going to have to bite our tongue and plead with people to just relate to us on a human level.
Well, in New Jersey, the reality is many, if not most people on bikes also drive. And many, if not most people who drive have a family member or know somebody who rides a bike. So it's not like we're totally opposite. There were 3 quick things I wanted to raise, if that's okay.
Oh, please do.
It sounds like we could use some links for victims on the NJBWC website, whether it's an FAQ page, which I am now volunteering to edit if you need help, or just links to existing resources. I have some are not New Jersey based, but I think that would be, people are clearly looking for guidance. I wanted to say that when the Gaudreau brothers were hit, I think everybody knows Johnny Hockey from South Jersey, tremendous outpouring of support. Nobody said, why were those boys out biking in the dark on a road with no shoulder? Everybody said, oh my God, this is terrible. And everybody wanted to blame the fact that the driver had been drinking. But in reality, the driver in front had moved left to make room, and this driver had blindly passed on the right, which is a boneheaded, impatient, angry move that we see drivers do all the time. So I would say I thought Steve was really right, that we shouldn't excuse sober driving errors as if somehow they're better than drunk driving errors. And I think people just like to think, oh, that driver was drunk, meaning, oh, I would never do that. So I think it's an opportunity every time to draw attention to how people drive on a daily basis. And also know that if the public was willing to make an exception in that case and not blame the riders, if they connect with us personally, then they can not blame us either. And that's why I think this local incident that happened so close to here, right by a county park and right near Morris Township, where the city administrator is the former chief of police, is in fact an opportunity to bring up a conversation about how, you shouldn't be threatening people with your car.
Yeah.
There was one more. Oh, and the road signs, not yard signs, but road signs on the road where and when people are driving. Everybody submitted roads that need signs. And now everyone is asking, what can I do to help get those signs up? Because there's still so few. And so I would hope that this winter, the push is all about seeing those signs go up by April 1st, so that, come May, drivers will be familiar with having seen them. The state has the list. They're supposed to distribute to the municipalities. Please let me and others know how we can help now from the bottom up to really get them out there. Otherwise, it's going to be another year, and that would really be a shame.
Yeah,
So
and Rebecca.
let me just respond to Rebecca on this. Or Paul, you want to do it?
No, go ahead.
Just what we know so far. So we have been following up. We have followed up with DOT on where they're at with that. And they have told us that they're in the process of giving the non-state road recommendations for signage to the municipalities and counties. The DOT has sort of, they've said that there are 46 sites on state roads that they're going to do, but it's really going to come down to people pressuring their local municipalities and counties to put these up. And the fact is that those of you who have tried to get signage or things done in your towns around infrastructure know there's something called the Manual for Unified Traffic Design, the MUTCD, okay? And this manual is a lot of what officials or engineers in your town will say, well, I can't do it because it's not in the MUTCD,
But it
right?
is.
You've all heard this, right? If you've tried to do this. And now it is in the MUTCD. So I spoke to the county planners meeting. We've been talking with municipalities, counties. We need you all to reach out to your local officials, to your mayors, to your town council, to your engineers, and tell them that this is now an approved sign. It is being placed on state roads by the DOT, which makes it, you know, the stamp of approval, right, for the sign. And all you have to do is decide where to put it and put it up. So we're encouraging everybody to reach out to their municipalities and counties to do that. This should not be a heavy lift for them, and we'll continue from our part, from the NJBWC coalition, to put more pressure on the counties and municipalities to do this.
And some
And for
of the,
citizens who've not been to a meeting of their governing body in a while, very few people go. So if you show up in person, you are going to have everybody's attention. And by law, there's an open public hearing in every public meeting of your governing body. At that point, anybody there can speak on any matter that concerns them. And it's your right as a citizen to stand up there. They say always bring something to wave a picture of the sign and say, please put them on these roads now. It feels really good to get stuff done, and that is the way to start.
And just
the-
to be clear, this is the 4-foot passing sign we're talking about.
yeah, and the county folks in the county who have been advising us are saying it's much easier for them to get action on putting signs up on county roads if they've been requested by the municipality. So because their county roads are going to be in somebody's municipality, so it helps to have that municipality asking for it specifically. So that's where you come in. Go to your town council, make that request. They need to then pitch it to the county and show up to county meetings. We need to be creating a presence where they are used to seeing us, and it's not a aberration.
Also,
The-
two counties we've already gotten traction with are going to do this, and that is Hudson and Middlesex County are both looking to do this at the county level on county roads.
And it
And
was,
there, small steps.
and you can give suggestions of where that location might be. Again, generally the car-centric, engineering world is not going to have as good a sense of where these signs can go. And the only guidelines in the MUTCD is don't put them on roadways where there's a big wide shoulder or a bike lane. And the response might be duh, but it would be good to put them, sometimes we have those facilities or a nice big wide shoulder and then it disappears. So that's where the sign should go as you're entering a town, and all of a sudden there's a lot of parked cars and there's no place to ride but in the lane. So those are good locations. So it's helpful to offer those suggestions as well.
I just want to say one other thing, and we're still open for comments or questions from everyone. It's difficult sometimes to sit through a session like this because it gets frustrating. And I'm frustrated listening to it too, along with you all. I want to make the connection that a lot of the work that we do for Safe Streets, besides enforcement, trying to get infrastructure, trying to get bike lanes, trying to get crosswalks, trying to get policy, complete and green streets policies passed, Vision Zero policies passed. All of this kind of work is connected to making it a safer place to bike and walk, but also it moves the culture that we have the right to be there, that we should be looking at our streets for all users, right? And I think that going to meetings, doing this kind of policy work, having complete streets groups, participating in any way that you can, and we're here to help you. The Safe Network also is here to help you with events, with policy development in your local municipality. You can call on us. Paul is the program manager for this program, and we're here to help you in any way we can, along with other resources like your TMAs. Linda, I know I can see right here in front of me, from one of the TMAs. So we're all here to work together to help you. This safe streets work in general is what I think will help us to move the needle, and that we do not just have to rely on enforcement or lack of enforcement to make it safer for us to bike and walk. So I just wanted to put out sort of a positive moment that we are making progress. We are working together. We have a lot of ways to go, but I don't want us to get discouraged by the difficulties we're facing with enforcement and recognition of cyclists particularly.
And we have a couple things to think about that we'd like to encourage you to do. To organize in your own local communities. There are two events. One, the Day of Remembrance. So we just had that. There were several events that were held, and generally there has been one primary event. One primary event, and we try to get elected officials, things like that. It was very well done, and we'd love to see next year every town have their own event and then coalesce around the state event. It would be great if we could just raise the awareness in our local towns about these issues. And as small as it might be, it's something. It's a start, and it builds over time. The other thing is the safe passing law, and to help promote the law in a fun way. Rebecca had the idea of noodle rides. We call them noodle rides, where you take a pool noodle or inflate animal or whatever it's called. Some sort of a visual wand attached to your bike that extends out to the left 4 feet to give people a little bit of a visual idea. And then the idea is promote it, do a positive, make it a positive thing, get a bunch of people riding in a very prominent area with lots of visibility, and just make that ride, and people will see it. Get your local newspaper to cover it, social media, to raise the issue. And it's a fun way to raise the awareness of the safe passing law and make people feel be a little bit more aware. So it's something to think of, for next May, National Bike Month. It would be fantastic if we, towns all around the state were doing things like this. It doesn't have to be, a real complicated event. Just get a bunch of people together, promote it, people show up, attach it to the bikes, and make a ride. Love to see that on a statewide level.
And one more pitch. Those of you who have not signed the petition to get your senator, state senator, to support the Target Zero Commission bill. Again, this is a commission at the statewide level. We're trying to get that would create a action plan for safety for zero fatalities in the state. If you haven't done that, it's on our website. You can go ahead and do that. There's a pre-written letter, and it will send it to your assembly person and your state senator. So thank you. Thank you for everything you do. Let us know if you'd like to work closer with us in your municipality locally and doing some of this work. We're here to help you. We want to hear from you, and we're going to continue to work on policy development at the state level. And this recording will be on the website shortly, and hopefully we're going to try to add to it some Q&A answers because there were so many great questions that we did not get to today. So thanks for hanging out, and let us know how we can work with you going forward.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Sandor, you want to stay on for one moment?
If you need me, yes.
I just want to talk to you personally for a moment.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. I'm just waiting for people to jump off. Nathaniel, you are on mute if you need to say something.
Yes, I was just wondering if you ended the recording yet, because I had another question, but I didn't feel it need to be on here.